Today I decided to give you guys a review of Furiosa. This film is a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, released in 2015, and is also directed by George Miller. The film primarily stars Anya Taylor-Joy, as well as Chris Hemsworth, and is essentially the origin story of the character of Furiosa. The basic story of the film is that we see a young Furiosa living in a place of abundance and greenery, and is taken by Dr. Dementis and his crew. Dementis is a ruthless leader in the wasteland, and Furiosa very early on decides to get revenge on this man for ruining her life and taking her from her home. Eventually, she meets up with Immortan Joe and joins his crew, and along the line also finds companionship in another war rig driver, and ultimately seeks her revenge while an entire war goes on between Dr. Dementis, Immortan Joe, and the leaders of Gastown, Bullet Farm, the Citadel. That's the basic premise of the movie. So now let's get into the positives of the film. First and foremost is the young actress playing the younger version of Furiosa. I actually thought she would only be in the movie about 20 minutes or so, but really the first, I would say, solid third of the film, she's the star of the movie. And we don't see Anya Taylor-Joy as the character until about an hour into the flick. It's just as much her movie as it is Anya's, and she does an amazing job. Most kid actors range from so-so to decent, but this girl's actually really good, and I was actually impressed by her performance. Another positive of the film is the overall story itself. Whereas Fury Road was more or less about the action with some light story sprinkled in, this one is very story focused with also a lot of action sprinkled in. The action this time is still top notch, just like Fury Road, and I think that everyone here is giving it their all. All of the actors are trying their best. No one here seems like they're dead weight, and everyone is really firing on all cylinders. Most of the effects, for the most part that is, are pretty good in the film, and that's another positive. The wastelands never looked more dreary and run down, but also has like a sense of beauty to it. And I'd say another positive of the film is the way in which the story is told. It's actually broken into, I believe, 5 different chapters, each chapter having a different title, and it feels like you're more or less being told a fantasy tale. Mad Max has been told this way before in the sense that someone that's had narrators, but it's never been broken into chapters, and I actually think it works very well for this film and makes it unique among the franchise. Each chapter's about half an hour long, and it's a really interesting way to tell this kind of story, and actually does focus more on the characters than Fury Road or probably any other Mad Max movie ever has. It's definitely the best origin story that we've ever gotten in the series, much better than Max's origin story. Although I don't think I like Furiosa as a character as much as Max, because I just really love that lone wasteland survivor going around. I still do think that her character is very interesting here, and it's great to see her become the character that we all know and love from Fury Road. And lastly, one of the best aspects of the film is Chris Hemsworth as Dr. Dementis. He is great in this film, and he completely steals the show. Just an awesome and cruel villain, and one that you're really going to like. The guy is not that great of a leader, and it shows it in the movie, but he makes up for his lack in leadership skills with his pure demented nature, no pun intended. And that's how he keeps people online. It's actually an interesting take on a villain, and one that's more flawed as a person than some of the previous villains, and is a little more complex than previous Mad Max villains. On to the mixed aspects. And one I'd say is the CGI in the film is not as good as Fury Road. People have been making out this film has like an ugly movie because like there's some CGI effects that are a little bit rough. But for the most part, that's not the case. Most of the CGI looks just fine. There's just a few spots where it's a little janky. Overall, I'd say about 90% of the effects are still great, and 10% range from decent to could be a little better. Overall, still a beautiful film, but I do have to admit it's not quite as good looking as Fury Road. Another mixed aspect I would have to say is the finale. While you do get a pretty big ending, there's not like a huge final action sequence, much like Fury Road. It's kind of more of a personal finale, and it's not bad, but I was expecting like a big bombastic ending, but you kind of get that earlier in the film. But I still enjoyed the way the film did end up. And as for the negatives, there's not really much I have to say in terms of negatives. There's a few mixed aspects, but the film is just really solid and one that I really much enjoy. Now, as for my final score, I'm going to have to give Furiosa a 9 out of 10. It is magnificent. I highly recommend all of you go to the theaters and watch it. You will have a good time. This film is very entertaining. The only thing is, it might be a little long for some, but I think for the most part, you're going to enjoy it. It's 2.5 hours roughly, but it just breezes by. There's not a slow moment in this film. Now on to some mild spoilers. Nothing major, but just a little bit here. For one, and that's Mad Max. Mad Max is in this film, for anyone wondering, but he's only in the film about 20 seconds. And he's actually played by Tom Hardy's stunt double from Fury Road. Of course, it doesn't really matter who plays him because you don't really see his face much. But it was a nice little wink and nod. But if you're here for Mad Max, you're only going to get a very little small amount of them. And the last spoiler I'll give away is that ultimately Furiosa does get her revenge, which is kind of obvious because Dementus is not in Fury Road. I'm not going to tell you how she takes out Dementus, and it's even questionable whether or not it's just a tale that's been passed on. She really killed this guy this way. But his fate is one of the most metal and frankly effed up endings I've seen to a villain ever, and it's glorious. But apart from that, I have to say overall, it's just a good movie. I recommend it to anyone who likes good action. And on a scale of 1 to 10, like I said, I give it a 9 out of 10. Check out Furiosa. You're going to have a good time. Also, if you're a fan of Mad Max, I recommend the Mad Max video game on PS4. Really fun action. Really great characters in this game. And it does tie into the Fury Road movie loosely, but it's still really great. It's underrated, and I recommend it. And if you have yourself a modern console, check this game out. It's available on PlayStation as well as Xbox. Thank you all for watching, and peace out.